Morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever time of day it is. Thank you for tuning in to Conversations with Dr. Don. For your first-time viewers, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of one-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals and about whatever it is that they are wanting to talk about. And of course, my guest this evening, Rebecca Parker, will be talking about midwives and midwifery and those kinds of things. And I always blurt on the opening speech, you know. How are you feeling right now?
Great.
You're not nervous?
I'm comfortable with the topic and really interested in talking about it.
And from the stuff you sent me by email, you should be with how many, 1,600 pages? No. Your credentials are just impeccable and so long. And I have a special respect, a feeling for a person like you and your involvement with human beings and helping where you're, that whole group of people who do that kind of work.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's wonderful.
Yeah. So, titled Portland Pioneering Midwives. Why pioneering?
Midwives are often on the forefront of standing up for women's rights, for preventative health care, and they're right out front. They're right out front.
For how long have they been that way out front, right out front?
Well, they've always been in the U.S. since the 1900s, probably earlier than that. They went through a lot of persecution with the medical establishment for many decades. And there's a first school of midwifery back in about 1920, and then in 1925 there is a frontier school of midwifery that was formed in the Appalachian Mountains.
And we'll get into that more in the second half of the show, but let's talk a little more about who you are personally. Ready?
Who I am, yes.
All right. Usually I have one or two trick questions for my guests to catch them off guard to see what they'll respond with. You aware of that?
That's fine.
Okay. Where were you born?
L.A.
L.A.?
L.A., yep.
Son of a gun.
County Hospital.
County Hospital. No midwife.
No midwife.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why
No
were you
midwife.
born?
Why?
Yes.
I actually came to serve and to help.
You came to serve and to help. That's why you were born.
Yes.
I'm glad you were born. Is there anything significant about your cultural or racial heritage that's worth mentioning to the viewers?
My father was a doctor. He was a PhD in microbiology and biochemistry. He had intended to be a medical doctor and had been accepted in med school, and he got drafted into the war before his papers came through. So when he came back from the war, they weren't accepting anybody in medical school, so he went on to get degrees in microbiology. And from that, I think I gleaned an interest in health.
Okay, yeah. And where is he today?
He's passed over. Yeah.
A while ago.
A good 20 years. Smokers, both my parents, so both of them died to lung disease.
Did you ever smoke?
No. No, I saw both of my parents die from it, and that was enough. And I saw enough in the hospitals, too, because I'm also a family nurse practitioner. I've seen many people on the other end of their life choices, and it's affected how strongly I feel about how we take care of ourselves and how it affects us. The relationship between what we eat and how we handle stress and how we exercise all has a phenomenal impact on how we age And even on how we give birth, it shows up.
Even in how we give birth, it
Yes.
shows up.
Yeah.
I'm interested as we get further along into the show. If I ask you a question that you don't want to answer, you don't have to.
That's fine. I have many questions for you, too.
You're going to turn the tables on me. How about a religious preference? Do you have one?
I am non-denominational but deeply spiritual.
What does that mean, spiritual?
That means that I receive guidance and respond to it.
From where? Or who?
From angels, from Jesus, from Mary, from different entities.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you have a formal religion before?
Catholic.
Oh.
I was raised a Catholic, went to Catholic schools for 10 out of 12 years. Went to a private school headed towards the novitiate, becoming a nun in high school. Not that I actually intended to do that, but there were always inclinations that way. And then I got into TM meditation.
Transcendental meditation, yeah. I've been there.
And then I followed an Eastern teacher for 20 years with a vegetarian diet. I'm no longer a vegetarian, but we meditated for 2.5 hours a day for 20 years. So it did give me the ability to focus my attention. And I find that to be powerful.
Oh my gosh, yes. You have some Buddhist tendencies, do you?
I love it. I think at the base of most religions, they are saying the same thing.
Yeah.
And I honor each person's path that they take to experience the spiritual.
Yeah. There's something about you that's hard to put words to. Yeah, I need to be aware of the work I'm doing at the same time I'm experiencing you, because I just want to mellow out and hang out with you. Yeah. So let me continue on and say a few words about your formal education, because we don't have 3 hours to cover all the things that you've gone to school for or learned.
Okay.
Yes.
I got an RN degree from the University of Hawaii. Had a lot of fun while I was over there, going through a nursing program. And after that, my husband and I moved to Indiana, where I worked in a hospital for a year. Before I started working with 5 doctors in Chicago who did home deliveries. As Mayor Eisenstein, and worked with 4 other doctors. That was such a fun job. And one of his colleagues was Dr. Mendelsohn, who's passed over a long time ago, but he was a pediatrician who was a keynote international speaker, and he wrote a book called How to Raise a Healthy Child in Spite of Your Pediatrician. and so that was the environment that I was incubated in with my thoughts around natural birth.
You know if that book is still available?
It is.
Let's say it again.
How to Raise a Healthy Child in Spite of Your Pediatrician by Dr. Robert Mendelsohn. So after I worked with them, there was a move to Northern California. I had a midwifery practice there where I worked under standardized procedures with a doctor. So that was basically a contract with a doctor where the women would see a doctor when they were pregnant, and then if there's a complications, we would transfer to the doctor in the hospital, and I would stay with the client. But my transfer rate was so low, we actually never needed to transfer. From there, I went down to Southern California and joined a group of 200 people who owned and operated a 50-acre health spa. So that was at Murrieta Hot Springs.
Oh, yes.
So while I was there, I got to work in the nursing department, and there were 3 of us, and I got to make tinctures and work with herbs and homeopathics and Chinese medicines and mud and mineral baths, and great exposure to everything complementary, as well as we had an MD on staff. So it was the best of both worlds.
So the things you're saying, there's so much you've got to say until I could contribute or have some feedback. I've been involved or experienced the kind of things you're touching on right now, but I want to keep hearing about you. I may chime in here and there. I'm a recovering Catholic.
Okay.
And I went to seminary for the weekend to be a final check to see whether I had a calling. And this hole in my chest, you know what that's from? Too many mea culpas, yeah. That's enough of my lame stuff. My viewers have heard this 1,000 times probably. And so you had a lot of formal education and formal training.
I did, from Murrieta Hot Springs and the health spa. We moved to Oregon because I wanted to go back to school. I wanted to work in the system. I was doing midwifery down there under standardized procedures, but I wasn't able to get referrals from the public health department or the doctors. So I went to midwifery school at that point, to the Frontier School of Midwifery, which was a long-distance program based on the Yale curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
So it was self-paced. I took 3 years to get through it.
Oh.
I worked at the Milwaukee Birth Center, which was up and running at the time, Virginia Garcia Clinic out in Hillsboro, and then Emmanuel Hospital, where I was responsible under supervision for managing labor and delivery and then postpartum. When I finished that training, my intention was to get on the insurance panels and function as a midwife, and I found that I couldn't get on half of the insurance panels. I had applied to be out in Gresham, and they said, well, we have OBs out here, so women have access to medical care. So I wasn't able to get on the panels I wanted to get on. And one of the midwives, who was also a family nurse practitioner, said, well, you ought to go back to school, get your family nurse practitioner's license, and then you can get on the panels that way.
You get the proper credentialing that they would recognize, yeah? Make you jump through extra hoops.
Yeah, so I liked that idea, and so that's what I did. So I went to the University of Portland to get my family nurse practitioner's license, got that. And then when I got out, I also went through a year's training in nutrition because I was doing a lot of nutritional counseling in midwifery, and figured I might as well get some credentials behind it.
Did you ever deliver any babies during this period of time?
And not during the midwifery program. You weren't allowed to. But otherwise I could, but I didn't while I was in school. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. And you're still practicing?
I am. On a smaller scale. Mm-hmm. I moved down to Ashland for a couple years in 2008, 2009. And then for a while I went into real estate investing. Well, we can leave that one alone.
Over the map.
Yeah.
Do you have a partner, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, or one of those kinds of characters?
I did. Yeah.
And do you have children?
I have 3 grown daughters and 6 grandchildren.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
What do your daughters do?
One of them's up near Mount Hood, and she's a wonderful mom. She has 4 children, and she just got her real estate license. Mm-hmm. So she's out selling houses in addition to taking care of all the kids. Yeah.
Do the grandkids like you?
You know, I'm going to say yes. I don't see
You
him
thought about that
enough.
rather carefully.
I don't see him enough, and I find it's harder in this age with the computers and the iPads
Yeah.
to build a relationship with them. They're often on the computers or watching TV, and it's frustrating for me.
It makes me sad for us to talk about that, what's happening to us.
Yeah. I've just decided to have a conversation with my daughter to see if there could be more activities when I'm there where I can build something with the girls.
And then
So-
you'd be more sure that they like you.
Well, the little 1-year-old does. I mean,
Because I can tell you don't like her. Is it a her or a him?
her.
Her. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, political persuasion. Are you a Tea Party or a right winger or a lefty or what?
These days I think if you vote Democrat or you vote Republican, you're going to get the same thing.
Those two terms don't mean
Yeah,
anything to me.
I think there's so much corruption. So I am in favor of single-payer health care.
Yeah.
Yeah, that and full coverage for Medicare.
Yeah.
I would like to expand that. I'd like to abolish fees for schooling. I think schooling ought to be free, and then I would come in and abolish all the school loans. So you'd have to say I'm lean towards the left.
Leans toward, you're falling off the edge. Wonderful. Of course, you can tell that I am, yeah. Memberships in political, social, or civic organizations, any memberships worth mentioning? And not all of those in the material you gave me.
I do political activism.
Uh-huh.
I've been down to Salem a number of times this year.
Salem, Oregon, our capital. I've been there a number of times.
Yeah, health care for all Oregonians.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going down Monday to support the farmers and learn more about the farm policies. I'm really interested in good loans for the small farmers and
yes.
for home industries.
Good loans. You're going to talk about Kiva later on, or shall you say something about it now?
Well, I could. I'm a volunteer trustee for Kiva Zip.
Say what Kiva is.
Kiva's a international micro-funding organization that's been around for 13 years. The originator of the idea, not the people who started Kiva, but the originator of the microfinancing loans, got the Nobel Prize for Economics.
Mm-hmm.
He was an East Indian professor, and he started giving $27 to women in the slums of Bangladesh to make bamboo chairs to pull them out of poverty.
Yeah.
So Kiva Zip has been in the U.S. for 3 years, and because we have PayPal, the loans can be zero interest because we don't need an intermediary. So I look for people who are starting small businesses or expanding businesses that need small amounts of capital, maybe from $2,500 to $10,000. And if they repay that on time, they can double the amounts of those loans.
And that's going on in this country too.
Yes. Yeah, Kiva Zip has been in the U.S. for 3 years.
So what's the rate of default on paying back on these loans of people who get Kiva loans?
3%. 3%. And it's interesting that the repayment rate is higher in the third world countries than it is in the U.S. I think more of a feeling of entitlement in the U.S.
Yeah.
and not as strong of relationships in the U.S. as you find in third world countries.
So there's something heartening about what's going on in the world as far as human beings being decent to fellow human beings.
Definitely. I mean, if you think of the potential of what Kiva Zip could do in a community, I mean, if everybody who wanted it and had a grounded idea could get funding to start up, I mean, it could slash the unemployment rate. It could really help the economy flourish.
Will the corporations allow that, what you're talking about?
Corporations
you sound like some
have,
sort of a socialist. Huh?
Corporations have nothing to do with it.
I know.
The banks have nothing to do with it, and that's the beauty of it. You just, it's people supporting people, and it's really beautiful to see people from all over the world giving loans to maybe somebody in Portland who wants to produce a music video or needs to get their car fixed, or a farmer who wants to do a line of beef jerky. It's very beautiful.
I like that last one, line of beef jerky.
Well, that's what Sean and Melissa McGuffin in Camas, Washington, just got a $10,000 loan to do beef jerky. They have an organic farm there.
So a person who's interested in using Kiva would just go to the internet and do Kiva?
Yeah, Kiva Zip, ZIP.
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 What does ZIP mean?
It's specific to the U.S. where these loans are interest-free because of PayPal, where we don't need the intermediary. In third world countries, there's an interest rate attached to the loans because they have intermediaries who disperse the money and then collect it each month.
Any other organizations worth mentioning that you're a part of?
I go to the Ukulele Association jams.
You're all over the map.
Would-be musician, I am.
What does that do for you?
It always keeps me fascinated with multiple things to do. Never bored. And I don't know that I've ever known boredom.
Okay. Persons from the past or alive today that you particularly admire or admired or look up to? Any names come to mind for you?
Mother Teresa.
Figures.
Because of what she did with no money. She never let money stop her. She was always out there looking for who needed help and responding to that. I mean, what's more beautiful than that?
Is that kind of like you?
I am not as dedicated as she is. I mean, she was full on 24/7. I go to the ukulele jams and I make sure that I'm having fun along with helping. So I look for a real balance in my life.
Ukulele jams, that's a new term. I never heard that.
Ukulele.
I heard all sorts of jams, but
They're
ukulele
fun.
jams.
They're fun, yeah.
And it's good for you.
Yeah.
I think you know how to have fun.
I do.
How about we'll take a break now so we'll have enough time to cover midwives and midwifery.
Excellent. I'd like
Mr.
that.
Director, can we take a break? carefully, carefully. Hello, we're back again. Thanks for staying tuned. And for you viewers who are just goofing around and stumbled across this show, you're looking at Conversations with Dr. Don. It's an ongoing series of 1-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like Becca. Can I call you Becca?
Mm-hmm,
Over
definitely.
here is my guest this evening. About what she's about with midwives and midwifery and those kinds of related subjects. And we've had a good time so far talking about who you are personally. Now let's go into the topic of the show. If you want to start talking on your own, or I can start asking you some questions, how shall we do this?
Okay, well, I'm happy to start talking.
Okay.
I got interested in midwifery when I was in nursing school. I saw deliveries, hospital deliveries at Tripler Army Hospital in Hawaii, where I was taking my nursing training. And at the same time, a friend gave me a book on home birth. It was Raven Lang's birth book, and it was about home births that were happening in the Berkeley area in the 70s.
In California.
In California.
Mm-hmm.
And I was enthralled. I wasn't enthralled with the way women were treated at the Army hospital and what I saw happening there. But I found that the birth itself was magical and very beautiful. So I quickly, after nurses training, moved into a situation after I'd moved to Indiana of attending home deliveries with attending home deliveries and then meeting and working with Dr. Mayer Eisenstein in Chicago, who did home deliveries.
Let's back up for a moment because
Okay.
You said magical,
Mm-hmm.
and that I'm hooked on that word. What do you mean by magical? The experiencing of a birth.
Well, have you ever seen a baby be born?
No,
It's
just videos.
It's incredible. It's just incredible to see this being come through and the strength of the mother in working with her body and working with the contractions to bring forth this new life, and then this new life comes out and the baby can be very, very alert. And it's very intimate if the couple is in an intimate setting. So you can feel the beauty of it and the intensity of it and the magic of it, particularly in a home setting. I don't experience that with hospital births.
Okay.
And sometimes in birth center births, I would find that. But in the home births, it was consistent. And you were always there working with the people who were motivated and the women who were taking care of themselves, their bodies, eating well, and wanting to connect with their partner and the baby. And when the woman is uninterrupted in birth, the right side of her mind will switch on, the intuitive side.
Would you think that this is spiritual, what you're talking about?
There's
Something we don't quite
physiological explanations for it, and
Okay.
Dr. Michelle O'Donnell pioneered that work in the 70s and continued to do research. He was the first physician in France to do water births, and he's the one that popularized water births way back in the 70s. And he talked about having the women give birth in a small, dark room and in the water. So he would leave them uninterrupted to do the work of labor. I think one of the things that a lot of American women are missing out on is being given the opportunity to do that work of labor. Because when they do that work of labor, when they feel it, and they move through all the pain of the contractions and move beyond the point where they think they have the strength to do it, they actually find out how very strong they are. And that's magnificent. And that has an incredible difference in the way women view themselves. It's a matter of empowerment, of a woman feeling that they can do anything after they've been through labor. If a woman receives drugs, she has an entirely different view of her abilities. And she'll say, thank God the drugs were there. I couldn't have done it without them. But if she is in a place where she's supported in natural birth and not offered the drugs, and she comes through it without the drugs, she'll say, my God, I can do anything now. Complete difference in how she views herself. And I think a lot of the postpartum depression comes from those situations where the woman was not allowed to do it on her own. And I say allowed because a lot of the hospitals now have epidural rates that are 70 or 80%.
Epidural meaning?
Medication
Yes.
that's given to the women to block the pain of the contractions.
Pain, yeah.
So if a woman walks through a hospital door, 70, 80% of the time, she's going to end up with an epidural.
Yeah.
That's, in my view, can be catastrophic. Plus, the C-section rates are on an average of 33% nationwide. That means she's got
Is that necessary?
No.
So there's a difference between natural and unnatural birth. So C-section birthing is unnatural.
Well, I would take that word out completely. It's a medical procedure when there's a C-section performed.
Yeah.
But it's 1 out of 3 women in the U.S. are having C-sections. Now, with all of those epidurals, 70 to 80%, and 1 out of 3 women having C-sections, you would think that that should make, or you would wonder if that would make the U.S. a safer place to have a baby than other parts of the world. What do you think? You think that makes, do you think our outcomes in the U.S. are better because we have epidural rates of 70 to 80% and C-section rates of 1 out of 3?
I'm thinking about in third world countries, there's other things going on at the same time that influence the success.
Right. So if you exclude all the third world countries and just talk about the industrialized nations,
Sure.
do you think we would get better success since we put more money into our health care than any other country?
I'm not evading your question. I'm looking at it more closely because there's a motivation for the AMA and those kinds of people to make money, and caring for the patient is secondary.
That can be the case too. You know, when a woman has a home delivery, it's maybe $3,000 to $5,000. Vaginal hospital birth is around $15,000 to $17,000.
That much difference.
That much difference. And how much do you think a C-section is?
20,000.
30.
30. I was going to say 30. Oh,
30 on
God.
up, so double.
So the physicians would probably make more money doing C-sections than.
Right. And what about the hospital?
Oh, you got a hospital.
Hospital too. Hospital too. So is there any financial incentive for the doctors or the hospitals to be behind lowering the C-section rates? None.
None. Yeah.
None at all. So where would the changes come from? If it's not going to be from the doctors, the hospitals, the AMA, where might changes come from to get down the C-section rates?
People like you doing what you're doing. And convincing ordinary citizens like myself to talk to their legislators and people who make the laws.
Yeah. Well, let me come back to the results that we get in the U.S.
Please, please.
We spend more money than any other industrialized country on health care, and we stand number 35th in the world in our outcomes for our babies amongst the industrialized nations.
35th?
35th.
That's crazy.
35th. That means if we want our babies to have a better chance at living, we would go to Luxembourg, who has the lowest infant mortality rates in the world. It's a little country in Europe.
Yeah.
The Netherlands, Finland, Sweden, Norway, all have lower rates.
Do they have more midwifery?
Yes, they do. They do, and particularly in Holland, 1/3 of the babies are born at home. So Japan, we could go to Japan. Slovakia has better outcomes than the U.S.
Get out of here.
It's true. It's true. And
what does that say about America?
right. And what's even more appalling is that we had better rates 100 years ago. And you know what the C-section rates were 100 years ago?
What?
5%. Now they're 33.
Why is that?
And I have
know.
to add this in. What's even more troublesome is that the maternal mortality rates, how many women die in the U.S., is increasing.
How can that be when
How
the
can
medical
that
profession
be
is involved? And they're
when
supposed to save
we
lives?
have all the technology, when we have the drugs? So what's going on that those rates particularly are getting worse?
What is going on? Why
The
is that?
C-sections. It's the increase in C-sections, and particularly repeat C-sections, and particularly the third one. You've got a whole increasing levels of complications, and women dying there actually from losing too much blood or complications from those.
So their primary interest is to support the capitalist system. I'm getting political here now. Or make money so that they can have, never mind.
And I don't want, there are good doctors out there.
I'm a socialist, did you know
and
that?
there are doctors that support midwives and midwives that support doctors.
Sure.
There are many stories of that. But on a whole, we are doing so poor as a nation. And it's looked at in terms of the interference that has happened in childbirth. So,
How much does the AMA have to do with the conditions we're talking about now, the American Medical Association?
that one I couldn't be specific about.
Okay.
I mean, I think most doctors are members of the AMA.
Yeah.
So, but one of the things, in the past couple decades that was increasing the C-sections was the label that women were given called failure to progress.
Mm-hmm.
When they would use this bell curve that a doctor in the 50s established that said women should dilate so fast in so many hours, and if they weren't following that curve, they would get sectioned for failure to progress. So now they found out that, well, that wasn't quite accurate, and if you just give babies more time and you recognize that active labor isn't happening until after 6 centimeters, then the C-section rates can be lowered because of failure to progress. So,
Shall we go to some of my questions, or do you want to continue on with your own spontaneity?
Continue.
So you told us about midwifery and midwives. Anything more you want to say about that generally before we continue on with the other questions?
I would like to say for any woman catching this show,
Yes.
to please be active in educating yourself. There's a number of sites that people can go onto to get good information. One of them is midwife.org.
Midwife.org.
And that's the nurse midwifery site, and there's tons of information there. There's a beautiful 117 slide presentation giving the history of birth and all the things you want to avoid and all the things you want to have be a part of a natural birth to optimize the chances of a good outcome. So that's one site. Another one is the Citizens for Midwife, Midwifery, Citizens for Midwifery.
Citizens for Midwifery dot what?
.org, I think.
Yeah.
Another one is the MANA site, M-A-N-A.
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 .org or .com. .org.
Yeah.
So you can go there, any of those three sites, and get more information.
Yeah.
So that you can decide whether or not it's in your best interest to go to a midwife rather than an MD or a hospital.
Yeah, and start finding out what the C-section rates are at the hospital you're thinking of going to, what the C-section rates of your doctor are. Start asking a lot of questions and reading.
All right. Where'd the term come from, midwife?
Midwife means with women, with woman. Means to be with her. Because when a woman is attended to in labor, it actually has a statistical difference in how she bonds with her child and how she raises her child. And this is independent of the partner being present. It's how a woman is attended to. And if a woman is attended to without interruption, it makes a huge difference in how she goes through the labor and how she feels about it afterwards. Isn't that beautiful?
Yes,
With
it
woman?
is. What is it about a mother who decides to see you rather than a traditional MD? What about that mother who decides to see a midwife?
I think the women who find me are very brave, and they have usually educated themselves. I've not done any advertising, so it takes people quite a bit to find me now. The website will make it easier for people to find me, the Portland Pioneering Midwives.
PortlandPioneeringMidwives.com.
Right,
There
right.
it is on the screen. So jot that down, you folk out there, so you can find out more.
But it's usually the cream of the crop who are taking care of themselves and have read, and they're really fun to work with.
Special kind of mindset, among other things.
Yeah,
There's something
fun.
about what we're talking about that has a sort of something other than that which we are normally aware of with our cognitive processes. The spiritual, I gave up that kind of thinking many years ago, but I find that in recent years I've been looking at certain things that occur to me in my life where I could characterize no other way than spiritual, because there's no way of describing them. And I'm thinking about what it must be like for that mother to give birth at that moment to that new life. and to be present when that's going on. So I'm getting off into my spiritual self here.
Well, it's precious, and it's actually it's the same intimacy you have when a couple's making love. So that same intimacy is there at birth in the home,
Yeah,
and
in the
everybody
home.
present feels it, and it's just palpable.
I just had a sense of sadness that came over me pretty quickly. I have 5 daughters, and I wasn't there, and they were hospital births. And I'm wondering what it would have been like to have my babies, my daughters, born by natural childbirth, and to having been there by my wife's side when that was going on. That's a whole other stage of my early life before I grew up somewhat.
Well, it's it gives a sense of family. It gives a sense of community, a sense of connection. So the whole medicalization of birth, the whole move from the home to the hospital occurred in about a 10-year period. Prior to the world wars, women were having their babies at home.
Yeah.
And it was natural. The kids saw it, and when the world wars occurred and the doctors weren't available to go out to the homes, then the women were taken in, and then the financial incentives came along with that.
I think about the movies I've seen where there's a home birth going on and more water and more hot water.
Yeah.
Medicalization of childbirth.
Medicalization.
I never heard that term before, medicalization.
When the drugs started coming on the scene, and it was back, before 1900, there was a lot of experimentation going on. And there were actually psychedelics used, and women would develop amnesia, and they would get up and just walk off the ward. So that's where they started tying women down in the beds.
Oh my gosh.
So by the time I had my first child in 1970, you not only had your feet put up in stirrup, I had my hands shackled down, which was an infuriating experience.
You were rendered helpless then.
I was definitely rendered pissed off.
Oh,
And I thought,
like
never again, never again.
Yeah.
So, and I think that spurred my interest in going the other direction.
What else have I got for you? You talked about empowerment in a woman. Yeah. How did you decide to become a midwife? Any
Well, I
call or a
think,
specific thing that went on?
I had my first child in the hospital with what was then called a saddle block before epidurals came along. And I ended up with a splitting headache from it, and it was a horrendous experience. And I wasn't going to have that again, and I thought, never for me or any other woman I can help. And from then I went on to get into nursing school and read about home deliveries and follow the path to become a midwife. When I started functioning as a midwife, there weren't even birth centers around. And at that time, the fathers weren't allowed into the delivery rooms, and there are a lot of the procedures that were going on that we try and get away from today that are still happening in the hospitals at times.
What's the difference between hospital birth, birth center births, and home birthing? Those three. What's the difference?
I think in home birth, I find that the women are more committed to the idea of optimizing a natural birth. So they will take more responsibility in their self-care, looking at their diet and paying more attention to their diet, paying more attention to their exercise, doing all that they can. In a birth center birth, there's some of that, but I generally don't see it to the extent I do with the home birth clients. And I'm speaking just for me and my practice. It could be different for other practices.
Sure.
And in hospital births, there's oftentimes not a lot of questioning about what's going on. Or the classes that they do get from the hospital are limited in the knowledge that they give the clients.
Yeah.
So, and if I sound biased, it's because I am. So.
Yes, I'm proud of my biases. So has midwifery been better for societies here and worldwide? I think I know what the answer is to that.
Yeah, I mean, definitely it is. And multiple times it's been shown that the births are safe at home if you're working with a trained personnel.
Yeah.
Have enough trained personnel, have adequate equipment, have a transfer plan, and have breastfeeding going on, because breastfeeding is actually a safeguard for home birth. Because when the baby breastfeeds, it makes the uterus clamp down so that there's less bleeding. So it's actually considered a safeguard.
And it's healthier for a baby too, anyhow, in those early months, rather than.
Yes.
When I was a kid, I got evaporated milk and Karo syrup and water.
Right.
Formula.
In the 50s, breastfeeding was almost extinct because the doctors would tell the moms that the milk wasn't good. And the breast milk looks very thin, but it's perfectly adapted for each specific baby.
Time is running low, but I got another question or two. In your career as a midwife, you think of any one or two cases that left a lasting memory or feeling with you? Anything unique about one you did 10 years ago?
It's really hard to say because each time a baby comes out is very magical. I
that
think
word again. I like it.
Women have the perfect labor that will help them grow. Sometimes it's short, sometimes it's long. Sometimes I've seen the women who have been in the best shape have the longest labors. But through that, they got to see how strong they were.
And they were different after the birth than before.
Yeah. So it was quite a celebration.
Can you name another profession that could give you as much satisfaction as what you're doing now?
No, I can't. I can't.
I really enjoyed having you here.
Thank
And for a number of reasons, not just intellectual stimulation, but because of how you are and what you do. So maybe you have some closing thoughts or that would give to our viewers about what's going on here. Look at that camera there and about what happened here tonight or profession. Anything else comes to mind, and take a minute or so to tell them.
I would just like to encourage couples, again, to educate themselves and to find somebody who matches what they want, because they really can have that, I believe.
Do the research.
Do the research. Do the research and look at the statistics, look at the World Health Organization, look at how we're performing as a country, ask questions, and put yourself in a situation where you can get what you want. Like if you want a natural birth, go to the home, go to the birth center. Don't put yourself in a hospital that has an 80% epidural rate, a 33% C-section rate, and that comes down to safety. So really look at the literature there. The literature does show that at home with the low-risk women, with trained personnel, it's as safe as a hospital birth with fewer interventions going on, a lot more client satisfaction going on, and lower cost.
We're going to have to stop. Thanks.
Excellent. It was a pleasure.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
A few PSA, public service announcements here, Mr. E, Mr. Director. I got to tell you about the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union. Without the ACLU, our civil liberties would be down the tube further than they are. Hooray for ACLU. Go to that website, learn more about the ACLU. To get my shows broadcast by other stations around the country, ask your local public access station to go to pegmedia.org and follow the instructions on how to have my shows broadcast from your local station, wherever you are in the country. And we got to end corporate personhood. Corporations are not persons, and money is not speech. As that Citizens United decision implied, end corporate personhood. Go to move to amend the Constitution. And do we have another? Oh, I got to thank you for watching. I really appreciate you watching. And remember KFC, kind, friendly, not bad KFC, Dr. Don's KFC, kind, friendly, and charitable. Be kind, be friendly, and be charitable to you too. And you. And you. And you. Thanks again and good night.
Good night.